kind of want to switch gears a little bit to the offensive side because I'm trying to look for trends, trying to look for reasons to believe in this offense. And I think there's a lot of stuff to like. If you look at the numbers overall, though, really mirror images of each other. I mean, last year's team, a 119 weighted runs created plus. This year, 118 weighted runs created plus. Strikeout rate, close to the same at 22%. The home runs, a little higher this year, 1.57 per game for this year's Dodgers. Last year's 1.3. But I think this lineup, as they're constructed, is better equipped to deal with postseason pitching. I don't think you're going to see an over 20 runners in scoring position drought like we saw against the Padres. I think the influx of big league at-bats, right? I mean, David Peralta, he struggled the last couple months. I think he's someone he's due to get right. I think Chris Taylor having himself a really nice bounce back here. He's back to being above average back. Max Muncy is a night and day different player than he was. We're talking about someone 35 plus home runs, 100 plus RBIs. And I think the big key, the guy I'm looking at is JD Martinez, because last year, Justin Turner, so many opportunities with runners in scoring position. He wasn't able to come through in the clutch. Last two postseasons, he was 6 for 47 combined. I think you throw JD Martinez, who's been one of the best hitters this game's seen the last decade. Also a guy was a 987 postseason OPS in a contract year. I like my chances.
No doubt about it. And JT, hey, man, he had been just a wonderful postseason
Dodger
player.
legend.
Yeah, absolutely. Up until the last 2 years. And, hey, that's baseball, man. It just happens. Sometimes you're not hot at the right time, and he did look overmatched towards the end of last year. But like I said, I don't think that's because he was necessarily overmatched. I just think it was one of those periods where, you have peaks and valleys. I think it just was a valley for him. So like you said, hey, baseball in the postseason, it's so unpredictable. That's typically speaking why the teams that have the best pitching, they win, because the pitching is what can make games predictable for you. Offense comes and goes. You can't tell who's going to get 2 hits this game, 3 hits the next game, although Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts, seems like they get 2 or 3 hits every game. But, hey, that's the inconsistent part of it. But if you can go out and you can string zeros, there's an old saying, pitching gives you courage. It definitely does that on the big stage. If you can, like Tyler Anderson did last year, if you can keep stringing zeros until Max Muncy can bust one, then you get that lid off. Now all of a sudden everybody in the dugout's loose. That's why I always say, hey guys, get that lid off early in the game. And when you can do it, getting 3 or 4 guys involved, say a guy gets a base hit, then a guy gets a double, then a guy gets a sac fly. You've used a third of your lineup to get the lid off, and now everybody's high-fiving. They're doing the Freddie Freeman. Everybody feels good about themselves. Then when you can match that with a pitcher that goes out there and strings zeros, that's how you win in the postseason. So, hey, what's going to have to happen is the Dodgers are going to have a pitcher that will go out there and give this team courage and give the offense long enough to get the lid off. We've seen several different times. It's taken till the 4th inning. It's taken till the 5th inning. All of a sudden, Max Muncy busts one. Then all of a sudden, you score 6, right? So that's going to be the key to this. Do we have enough pitching that's going to allow this offense on the certain nights where it doesn't score in the 1st inning, to wait until the 4th or 5th inning to hit that home run? Is that going to happen? I think that's going to be the difference.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the big key for this team is you have to carry this pitching staff. I mean, I think last season you didn't have that big collective exhale after a big crooked number inning, right? You were having loud outs right into gloves. Mookie, lots of hard contact, hit 269. The results weren't there. Will Smith, if that finds grass a couple different times when he hits it right there to deep center field, maybe things are different. Trey Turner wasn't able to come through. So, yeah, I think the reality is that these hitters, especially towards the bottom of the lineup, I think they're deeper. I mean, you had Trace Thompson having big at-bats, and he wasn't good. He was like 2 for 13, right? I mean, you had a Cody Bellinger that forgot how to baseball for 1 year. You had Chris Taylor who was having a down year. Max Muncy, you just mentioned, he was having a down year. I just trust this lineup this year more than I do last year's team. But I want to get your thoughts on kind of the bottom of this lineup, kind of the bench right here. Because, look, I mean, Rosario, he's done what he was supposed to do, right? I mean, they traded for him to hit lefties. He's done just that. Sometimes that bat quality is a little suspect, right? Doesn't kind of fit in with the Dodger mode. Kike Hernandez, he got off to a really hot start, then went into a little slump. He's picked it up of late. Peralta's the one that I find really interesting. I don't see a lot of people talking about David Peralta, but David Peralta, I mean, if you look at his numbers, I mean, last couple of months, I mean, he's hit 238 this month. Last month, hit 254, 620 OPS. Before that, 275. So his numbers have started to go down. And last year, his numbers went down towards the end of the season. He was dealing with that bulging disc in his back. Are you concerned all about David Peralta, and how would you fill those last few spots? Would you consider a Kolten Wong, or do you think that they're pretty much set?
Got to see Kolten Wong, and it was really cool because Yorbit Vivas, not to get off track here, we'll talk about the offense here in a minute. But
I'm here for a tangent.
Yeah, Yorbit Vivas had just gotten moved up to AAA Oklahoma City right when the Dodgers went and got Kolten Wong. And I think that was intentional because, you have to have your guys on the roster before September 1st to be eligible for the postseason. So I think they knew they were going to go get Wong, and then they brought Yorbit Vivas up because if you watch those two guys take ground balls, and I was interviewing a guy named Bryson Brigman, and those three were actually taking early ground balls: Kolten Wong, Yorbit Vivas, and Bryson Brigman. And it was real obvious that Yorbit Vivas was totally digging getting to take ground balls next to Kolten Wong, and that it was really a big deal for him. So that was really cool. That was my first experience of seeing Kolten Wong with my own eyes. Then he goes out and he goes like 4 for 4 in his first game. He starts hitting home, then he hits the home run first at bat for the Dodgers. So yeah, that's definitely a guy. Hey, anytime in every sport, whenever you're going to win a title, there's always somebody you don't expect that has to come through. Maybe that could be the guy for the Dodgers. No doubt about that. I think he's probably down the list. I think he's got to get through a Kike Hernandez. The thing about David Peralta, to get back to him, if you look at his postseason numbers, absolutely you have to worry about that. And I don't mean that to be negative. I mean that to be realistic, right? I mean, we want to win a World Series. We're the Dodgers. I talked to Austin Chubb, the high A manager last year, and one of my questions for him was, hey, you're trying to win, and they do have the playoffs in the minor leagues. So you're trying to win all these games. You're trying to win your playoff series, but yet they're ripping the 7 best players off your team right at the games that matter the most. How do you deal with that? And his exact answer was, hey, yeah, they're ripping our 7 best players, but guess what we're getting in return? We're getting 7 Dodger quality players to replace them with. So it is absolutely a next man up mentality. We've seen that all year this year for the Dodgers. That's, that grit, that determination, that next man up is what's got them there. Will that win a title? That it usually doesn't, but we'll see. So yes, I think there has to be some concern about David Peralta as far as, hey, he is starting to dwindle a little bit. You have Kike Hernandez, and so Jason Hayward's been hitting the baseball well as of late. Those are all things that the Dodgers, I promise you, they have 1 million people in their offices crunching 1 million different numbers. They know all these numbers. They know the postseason success and or failure, and they have options this year they didn't have last year. They had to put Trace Thompson out there. They didn't have a choice. They had to put Cody Bellinger out there. They didn't have a choice because they didn't bring James Outman back up. They do have options this year, so I think that's going to play in the Dodgers' favor, and I think they'll be able to put guys out there that give them the best chance.
Yeah, I just personally don't think there's very much wiggle room for those last couple of spots on the postseason roster. I mean, if you're down 6-0 in a postseason game, yeah, Kolten Wong's going to go up there and hit a home run to break up the shutout, right? But other than that, I think you kind of have to go with the guys that have gotten you here. And I think David Peralta, everyone's focused on his numbers of late, and yes, they are down. There's no doubt about that. But it's really about him putting the ball in play, right? Yeah. Contact is king, and he can do that about as well as anyone. I think he's someone I trust in the postseason. I've said it all year. He's going to have a big hit that's going to change a series. Some get that walk-off there on Jackie Robinson Day where James Outman scored right there. He's someone that these guys are wired differently, right? They got the slower heartbeat, lights get bright. Some guys can come through in those situations. Another guy I'm a little concerned about, just a little bit, is Will Smith. Now, Will Smith, of course, he got hit a couple times dealing with a concussion, of course, and he got hit and it was dealing with his swing. Dave Roberts said a couple days ago it was impacting the mechanics of his swing even subconsciously. And really, as far as his postseason numbers go, in the postseason, he hit 204 to 654 OPS. Of course, he's the first Dodger ever, first Dodger catcher, too, to have 5 hits in a game. We saw that in the 2020 NLDS against the Padres. Of course, he had one of the most important Dodgers home runs of all time right there in Game 5 of the NLCS down 3-1. He won the Will Smith versus Will Smith battle with that 3-run shot. But how are you feeling about Will Smith? Do you think this year with JD Martinez being that everyday DH, of course, they mixed things up when he went down. But do you think Will Smith, towards the end of the season, it's such a taxing position playing catcher at the big league level? Do you think he's worn down a bit? Do you think he's got enough to really finish strong here in the postseason?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. If you look at his season, he got off to a good start. And hey, man, he went an extended period of time and didn't hit the baseball very well. And then, then he's kind of been just that up and down guy since. I know the last 8 or 9 games, the average doesn't look good, but he has barreled some balls pretty good. So it was good to see him get a couple of hits a couple of nights ago because, sometimes the average doesn't actually show how well you actually are hitting the ball. So, hey, he's been that roller coaster guy. There's 3 things I think you can look back to specifically that you have to worry about Will Smith, getting hit on the head and being out for a little bit with concussion protocol. And then number 2, hey, he's my favorite player in the Dodgers system. He was the first guy I ever got to talk to when I was on the Oklahoma City Dodgers grounds crew. He is absolutely 100% unequivocally, totally and entirely my favorite player in the Dodgers system, Austin Barnes. I think that's played, a toll on Will Smith because you've had a backup catcher that sometimes you can't even put in because he's not producing. Does that make sense? So I think that workload right there, that's also taken a load on Will Smith. And then obviously just as you go on throughout the season, just your normal workload as a catcher as the season goes on, I think, that's a situation to where that wears down as well. And then 2, here's the third specific thing I think he's had working against him this year. You mentioned all those different pitchers they've had to incorporate into this Dodgers lineup. You're talking about Will Smith, who's had to incorporate all those guys as the catcher. The catcher spot's the only position that has crossover between the pitchers and the position players. So every time they brought up a new pitcher, that's a whole new set of meetings. That's a whole new set of bullpens. That's a whole new setup. Okay, it's one thing to know a guy's pitch mix. Hey, he's got 5 pitches. He has a slider and all that. It's another thing to really know how that guy ticks, if that makes sense. And to know, hey, I can see this guy, the look in this guy's eye, and this is what he's thinking. I need to go talk to him. That kind of chemistry. He's had to focus more on that aspect of the game this year than he's been able to. In the years past, we've had the best pitching staff, basically since about 2014. When you look at ERA, I think there's only been 1 year where the Dodgers didn't lead all of the National League in ERA. It hadn't been the case this year. He's had to incorporate all these different guys. In the past, he's been able to concentrate on offense. He's been able to show up, and I don't want to say cruise control. That's way over or underrating what he has to do. But when you're talking about Kershaw and the staffs he's caught in the past, you're more on cruise control definitely there than you were this year. So he's been able to just kind of show up and be an offensive catcher. This year, he's had to show up and be a guy that's really had to gel a staff together, and it's always changing. And I think that from a mental perspective, I think from a focus perspective, I think that's taken some away from his offense too.
That's a great point. I've talked to a lot of these pitchers that have come up this year, and you ask them specifically, who are some of the guys that really took you under their wing? Who are some of the guys that really mentored you and really showed you the ropes here at the big league level? And Will Smith is usually one of the first names that's brought up. And I think when you see his personality and how even the Dodgers kind of made fun of that with the whole stand-up comedy bit on his bobblehead night, right, saying he has a dry personality, I think some people might find that as a surprise. That comes as a surprise for some people. But the reality is that, from a communication standpoint to some of these younger pitchers, he's really kind of been that big brother for them this season. I definitely think that all of that combined, it's collectively really factored into the year. But honestly, you look at his expected numbers. Had a home run, a double late. I think he's still locking in. I think also, too, made his first All-Star team, and he's not sneaking up on anyone anymore, right? The word is out that Will Smith is one of the better, not just hitting catchers, but hitters in the league. You're seeing them attack him, fastball up in the zone away. But anything inner half, he's still crushing. As far as how they're attacking him, adjustments goes, what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, first of all, from, just a game plan perspective, also JD Martinez has missed significant time. Max Muncy has missed significant time. So there's been large periods of time in this lineup where he was the last real slugger in this lineup. So you're talking about pitchers that go, hey, the next 3 or 4 guys might get a hit off of me, but it's not going to be a 3-run bomb that's hit over 400 feet, right? So I think not only is he not sneaking up on people, I think there's also been scenarios where pitchers have been able to be careful with him as far as, the way that they pitch him. The thing that shows me that he's worn down just a touch, from a mental perspective, is that there's been times this year, the one thing I think that's really made Will Smith so plug and play offensively at the major league level is that he just doesn't chase the zone. He makes you throw the ball in the strike zone, which uncomplicates things so much for hitters. Hitters will work on their swing, they'll work on mechanics, they'll work on them for days after days after days, and then go out and swing at 3 pitches that aren't strikes. And you've just thrown all of that work away, right? Will Smith, the thing about him that made him so plug and play is that if the pitch was 2 inches off the plate from the get-go that he was in the major leagues, he didn't swing at it. I think there's been times this year where he's chased the zone more, and I think that just goes to show all of those other aspects that have been orbiting around him that have led to that. Having said that, I think the good news is there, Doug, when the playoffs start, the laser focus is going to set in, and he's going to go back to, hey, if you're 2 inches off the plate, he's not going to swing at it. And because of that, I think he's going to start swinging at all strikes, and we're going to see the Will Smith that we all love.
I agree. I mean, the margins are so razor thin as far as success or failure at the big league level. And when you lock in that much deeper, like he undoubtedly will in the postseason, I definitely think you're going to see the results. There's some uncharacteristic chases this year. But yeah, I'm not overly concerned about Will Smith, but I think we get the Will Smith that we know he's capable of being. He takes his offense to a whole nother level and he raises their ceiling. And that's why I feel confident that this team can slug their way to a postseason deep run and possibly a World Series title. So, yeah, I also want to ask you about James Outman. So, James Outman, of course, we know that you've been high on him for a really long time. You've interviewed him a countless amount of times. But I think for me, I've been so impressed with James Outman this year, the adjustments he's made in the season. I think, one, you saw his approach different, just kind of going for less slug, going for contact, and then you saw the results were better because of it when he really hit that drought. And then also just the reads. I mean, the routes, the defense that he's really put together in the last half of the season. I've just been very impressed. This guy has established himself as an above average hitting, above average defense, big league center fielder. It's going to be very affordable for years to come. And I think that's one of the big reasons why this year, whatever happens, it's been a success. And that's one of the big reasons why.
Yeah, no doubt. And when you look at what he's done recently, I haven't checked in like the last 3 or 4 games, but the last post I made on him, I think was about 3 games ago. And his on base percentage in last month has been over 400. And when you're talking about a guy at the bottom of this lineup that gets on base 400 times with his speed, okay, and you're turning that over to Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, that's an automatic run at the bottom of this lineup. And when you can steal a run at the bottom of this Dodgers lineup and then turn it over to Mookie and Freddie and then get into the slug of it, that's the formula right there to where the Dodgers go from being really good to a team that the other team just goes, hey, we can't handle this. We can't beat this team. And that's really the value offensively. I think, we've seen the 19 home runs, the 15 stolen bases. I didn't check last time the exact amount there, but that 2020 race is kind of cool. Don't think he's going to get there, but he's going to get pretty close. But, the real value for him offensively in the last month, and you've hit on it, the maturity of the hitter has been him just getting on base and using that speed once he gets on base. As far as the defense, that's just a matter of him getting comfortable. That's just a matter of him. We saw early on, especially like when a Michael Grove was pitching, we saw him dive at a couple of pitches that you're like, come on, man, what are we doing, right? Okay, and it's because he's just trying to do too much, right? I mean, he's just literally, that's his buddy on the mound, man. He wants to go and catch a ball that he probably knows he can't catch, but he's trying so hard. And as you go on and as you start going, hey, man, this is one fly ball out of 740,000 I'm going to have this year. I need to chill out and just do what I'm capable of, right? As you start relaxing from that perspective, that's when you start seeing the more natural routes. That's when you start seeing a guy that's attacking the baseball better and not trying to do too much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen at this level for the Dodgers, just because they've been so stacked with veterans, a rookie come up and really just embrace the failure to success process better than James Outman. You've seen it this entire year. The routes have improved. The discipline at the plate has improved. Using his speed, be cool to see him get to 20 stolen bases. I predicted he would have 25 home runs and 800 OPS, so I need him to pick up the slug a little bit so I can sound smart here at the end of the season. But yeah, I think he's going to be a big guy. So